Bandwidth for Cincinnati Soccer Talk is provided by Cincy Shirts. Get your locally sourced FC Cincinnati MLS merch today by heading over to cincyshirts.com. Now we should be live. Now you probably can hear me. There we go. We're back. Wow. Okay. Somehow I unclicked a button. Didn't mean to do that. Hey, it's a small world after all. I'm going to restart that. It's a small world after all, FC Cincinnati fans, as James O'Connor, old familiar friend of FC Cincinnati, puts a beat down on the Orange and Blue 5-1. It was not a very fun match to watch over the weekend. We're going to talk about that match, and, of course, we're going to be joined by Bobby Warshaw from MLSsoccer.com and the ExtraTime podcast. He's going to be joining us here in just a few moments here on the Kings Hammer Hotline. It's good to have him back on the show and get his thoughts on the first 25% of the season that has gone by already, quickly gone by for the Orange and Blue. And, of course, all the rumors and all the news surrounding a potential GM hire and all that coming up here on the show, and, of course, CST Extra Time afterwards. So we're here live tonight from the Cincy Shirts studios. We're glad you're with us here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Let's welcome in my co-hosts for this week. I'll start off with Ken Hetker. Ken, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Subes. I guess a little bit better than the rest of FCC land. Maybe I'm doing the same as FCC land. Magic Kingdom was not too magical for us, and we'll get into that later. But it's good to be back, and we'll try and bring some happiness to the weekend. A little happiness. I won't even say a lot. So good to be back again.
Well, glad to have you back. Of course, we're also glad to have back. He's like our, I don't know what you want to call him. He's like the moral compass to CST. He's the guy who always brings the truth. He brings the facts, and that's Rob Pierce. Rob, how are you, buddy?
Very good. Like any good journalist, always searching for the truth.
Yeah,
it was good to see you last week for the live show.
Yeah, it was good to see you guys as well. Good, in fact, really good to see all the fans who turned out there at Buffalo Wings and Rings last week. That was a great time, and I'll tell you what, the drive home, Rob, was very, very difficult. When I come down for events like that, it gets harder and harder to come back up here. I'm not going to lie, because I really do enjoy being there in front of the fans and getting a chance to mingle with our supporters and fans of FC Cincinnati. It is a good time. And we had a blast at Buffalo Wings and Rings last week.
Yeah. I can only imagine those trips are probably not too easy to make. But I'm excited to talk to Bobby Warshaw. He gave some great insight when he was on a few months ago, and it's nice of him to come back on again. Not so excited to be talking about this game, but hey, it's what we do. We're got to put the talk in Cincinnati Soccer Talk.
That's right. So let's get to it. Right, FC Cincinnati lose 5-1 over the weekend. Second time in their history they conceded 5 goals. Believe it or not. The other time also against James O'Connor and Louisville City FC back in August of 2017. That was a 5-0 loss. The good news for FC Cincinnati, hey, they scored a goal over the weekend. Darren Maddox scoring a really nice goal on some brilliant individual play. But before that, really just kind of a crusher, which changed a lot for Yohan Demay, Ken. The injury to Greg Garza. We don't know for sure what exactly happened with Greg. What we can say is it looked bad. Just the way they reacted to him on the sideline, the area on the leg that they were looking at looks like an Achilles. We have no confirmation on that. It did not look good.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody saw it, and I feel bad for him. I mean, him just getting named to the 40-man Gold Cup roster, and I don't see that being in his future, at least this year. And it was a big hit for the team. So I think it changed. To say it changed the complex of the game might be overstating it, but it definitely changed the tactics of what we were going to do. I think. Do I think it would change the outcome? Nobody knows, but I doubt it with a lot of what went on the field with a number of players. But yeah, I feel bad for Greg. It didn't look good at all.
No, it didn't. And for a guy, Rob, who's fought really hard to get back to fitness for FC Cincinnati, just it feels like this is kind of what's kind of followed him throughout his career. Always injured at the wrong times.
Yeah, you feel bad for him in a sense because he'd been working so hard just to get back to match fit, and he played last week at Nippert. I think that was his second start in a row. Might have only been his first.
I think it was his first because I think we were all surprised he started.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. But then he's making a second straight start, and this happens for him, or happens to him, I guess I should say, and it's definitely a little bit of a bummer. We were talking before the game how little time Audie and Safe have been on the pitch together. 17 minutes, I think, before. I'm still convinced that FC Cincinnati's best 11 players have not been on the field together, or if they have been on the field together just for a short amount of time. The club is better when Garza is on the pitch, and you've seen it in what little time that he's been on.
Yeah, hey, I agree, and actually, you bring up a good point. Of just think of it: Audie, Safe, Garza. Then we want to say Cruz, Bertoni, and Lamar. Those 6 guys weren't even really playing at all yesterday. So, and how many of those 6 guys? How many of us thought at least to start the year? We'll say 5 of those were. Safe wasn't part of the team, I guess, initially, but of the 6, I mean, I would think all of them are basically starters at some level or significant playing time. So,
really unfortunate for Greg. We're hoping for the best. We'll keep our fingers crossed there. Best wishes to you. Hopefully it's not something significant because Rob said it. I mean, this team is much better with Garza in the lineup, not just from a defensive standpoint, but from an attacking standpoint as well. They brought on Alvis Powell. Were you guys kind of surprised by that move to bring him on and not maybe I guess they moved Duplan to left back, and instead of maybe bringing on like another center back in Hagland and putting Hoyt at right back and Duplan at left back. I don't know. Were you guys kind of surprised by that?
Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
I don't think I was. Powell kind of brings the same thing. He can bomb up the side. It's the tracking back that he has a history of, but I'll tell you, he did a really good job of that the first few minutes when he came in. There was a short FC Cincinnati corner kick, and they kind of went the other way for a counterattack, and Powell tracked him all the way back and probably saved a goal. So it's probably kind of a like for like in a sense.
I agree with Rob on that aspect, but I've kind of done a little bit of, let's say, a 90-degree turn. I don't think Alvis Powell's a right back. I think I'm probably not saying something that a lot of people have been saying all the time, for a long time. Take somebody to admit, you're wrong. I thought he could play right back. I thought he was a risk. So I thought we were going to bring in Hagland and push Hoyt out to the left and keep Duplan on the right. Did Powell? I don't know. Powell didn't have a great game, but he didn't have I guess he didn't have a lot of bonehead plays. He just didn't stand out, I guess, in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we can really say anybody had a great game. I mean, when you lose 5-1 like you did to Orlando, I mean, I guess there were some bright spots. As I mentioned, Darren Maddox gets the goal on what was really, it kind of came from nothing, right? I mean, he's in the box alone by himself with really nobody to give the ball to. He's got 3 purple shirts around him, and somehow he manages to bang it into the top of the roof, Rob. I mean, that was a really, really good individual goal from Darren Maddox.
That was a really strange play. He gets the ball from Amaya, and he's got no help. You've got a few FC Cincinnati players kind of standing outside the box, and there are 7 Orlando City defenders inside the box, and everyone's just kind of watching Maddox. And he says, okay, I guess I'll shoot now. But about time for him. I mean, what a relief he must have felt. I mean, since Audie has been out, I mean, he's done everything but score a goal from the run of play, hitting the crossbar, hitting the post during that winless streak. You could just see the frustration on his face kind of building and building as the games have gone on. So I bet that was a big relief for him to finally get one in.
So he scores a goal. He makes it 1-0 FC Cincinnati. And with the injury early on, the forced early substitution, FC Cincinnati up a goal, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, okay, all right. They've managed the adversity at the beginning of the half. They're up a goal now. They're making Orlando chase in the heat. And then they concede a goal, just some really poor defending, Ken. And unfortunately, it took a deflection as well. Spencer kind of got fooled by the deflection by Tesho Ekendele, made it 1-1. I mean, at that point, you're thinking, no, they get to the halftime locker room, tied at 1. It's really anybody's half in the second half. And then it just felt like after the VAR, which is your friend, as we all mentioned last week, that really kind of turned the tide for the match, and there was just no turning back then.
Yeah, the wheels came off basically at that point. But yeah, I'll just hit on my little, VAR is not my friend. If there was no VAR, we would have gotten away with that. Boston would have gotten away with that tackle. But yeah, I was a little disappointed in the first goal. It just looked like nobody closed down anything from our center mids or center defensive mids to our center backs. I mean, even I don't want to blame Hoyt. It just looked like a team failure at that point. Nobody closed the angle down, and I think Brad Go wrote a great article. He explained that play exactly. Of what was going on and the poor angles we took. We can't have these bonehead mistakes over and over and over again. And that's something that Johan has got to Johan has to try and overcome. We got to be a little more consistent on our efforts.
Yeah. A lot of people in the chat tonight, they're saying that Spencer Ritchie looked like Mitch in the second half. Look, I mean, that not all of that is on Spencer Ritchie, right? I mean, it's still got to go through 10 guys in front of him. And to be fair, Spencer did a great job. He became the first goalkeeper in FC Cincinnati history to save a penalty kick in Major League Soccer. So there's that. Unfortunately, the save went right back to the feet of Nani, who tapped it in to make it 2-1. And then, I mean, after that, it was just get out of Orlando as injury-free as you possibly can, with as little sunburn as you possibly can. Is there any bright spot you can take from this, Rob? Is there anything that you look back on this and say, okay, it was a learning experience, or maybe this is something that they can learn from going forward?
I'm usually a positive thinking person. I will say that I'm glad that Amaya got to play the full 90.
Yeah.
Kind of extend him out a little bit and get his longevity going a little bit, and maybe he can do that again and again.
So Rob's a big Amaya guy, and rightly so. He played 90 minutes his first time in Major League Soccer, and again didn't look out of place. In fact, had a pretty crunching tackle there in the second half, but very fortunate to only walk away with a yellow card there. But Ken, I think you're kind of a little bit more on the positive side, even though it was a 5-1 loss. I think even I'm surprised at how positive you are.
Hey, the contrarian of the group has like flipped around on you, haven't I? I got 3 things that I think I'll say that are positive, or at least 2, and then I'm gonna read a statement that I think sums up. One is exactly what Rob said. I think Frankie Amaya is. To say the real deal, like he's going to be a star. I'm not there yet, but I think he's going to be a solid contributor. He's a pest. to the opponents. He gives 100% effort. He can do nothing but rub off in good ways on this team. He's a kid who has shown some leadership just through actions, and that's something that I'm proud about for Frankie. The other thing I want to take away is I do think we are building an identity. We are passing the ball around back. We didn't have a bunch of guys. Again, like I said, we have 6 guys that we're not even on the pitch that normally are. I'm not making excuses for the play, but we had 6 guys that we would have at the start of the season that we probably would have said they're in our starting lineup, or 5 of them. And we're trying to pass the ball around in the back and build out of the back. You can see that with this team right now, where before it was just clear the ball over the top and try and sprint to the other side. And that wasn't fun to watch at all. And I'm not saying this game was fun. I just saw a tactic being built, and some of the guys struggle with it, and that's all right at a certain level. It's all right to be learning that and spacing. And Johan came out and even said it. Hey, we're learning the spacing. Now we need to learn how to move with that space. We need to learn how to move with the ball. Those are all positive things. And the other thing that he said was they didn't do as good as they should have. And he said, that's on me.
Yeah.
How often have we heard that in the past? Is a coach sitting there saying, that's on me? That's taking ownership. That's a positive. But the big thing I want to say is, and it goes back to kind of what I've already said, is Matt Doyle wrote a little article or whatever on the 24 teams, and here's what he had to say about Cincinnati. And it's the very end that you have to really get. He said, FC Cincinnati were once again fun for a while with how they were moving the ball. The choice they have to face now is, do they want to be that team, the team that moves the ball around, one which is much more likely to end up on the wrong side of a few lopsided scores, or a team that just packs the box, bunkers, and just aims to keep it respectable? I would personally prefer the first one. I don't want to just sit there and bunker. That he goes on to say most teams, especially the ones that are short on attacking quality, take the bunker side. It's not as fun to watch and often has little long-term value. That's the line that you have to think about, is long-term value. We're in year 1. We need to build something. I'm not in it for just trying to be respectable. I want to see some guys, find some guys, discover some guys, some midfielders, and watch them build as a team. That's just my take. That's the positive I see out of it. And I guess that's all I have to say. I talked enough.
No, that was good. That was really well said. I guess the hard part for me, and I think, James O'Connor made it pretty well known during the week that, he was pretty amped up for this match. I know it's Orlando and FC Cincinnati. There's not really a natural rivalry there, but it's the fact that once again, James O'Connor gets the last laugh against us, and especially to be putting in 5 goals against us over the weekend. That I did not see that coming. But I just really don't want him having the last laugh after the previous history that these two teams have had. So, but we'd love to hear your feedback, folks. Get in touch with us. You can always email us feedback@CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. What are your thoughts on the match? What are your thoughts on Kendall Waston trying out for WWE over the weekend? I think he's got a pro career in the waiting after he retires from professional soccer. So, again, feel free to get in touch with us. Well, we're really excited now to be joined here on the Kings Hammer Hotline by a special guest. You know him from the ExtraTime podcast, where he is a co-host there, as well as great work that he does over at MLSsoccer.com. He is Bobby Warshaw, and he joins us now on the Kings Hammer Hotline. Bobby, welcome back to Cincinnati Soccer Talk. How are you?
What's up, everyone? Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're honored that you came back. Obviously, a lot going on in the first 25% of the season for FC Cincinnati. If you had to give, and I hate to do this whole grade thing, but if you had to kind of grade where they're at, what do you think of the first quarter of the season for them?
Well, the first thing I would ask is, who was just on? Because I thought everything that he said was great.
That was Ken.
I only caught the tail. Ken, I thought that was awesome.
Thanks, Bobby.
I agree with everything. What grade would I give? So I believe in relative grades.
Sure.
Right? And I think if you were Atlanta or LAFC, you would get an F,
Yeah.
right? I think it's fair to say that the season has not gone on absolute terms that well, but this wasn't going to be an absolute terms kind of season for FC Cincinnati. Expansion season, bringing in. I actually think it was almost harder for FC Cincinnati than it was LAFC and Atlanta, because I do think what we found is that there is an internal advantage to starting with a perfectly clean slate, to not having any emotional attachments, not having any contract attachments, that if you can come in with just that boatload of allocation money and pick players just off that, that is an advantage over, either already having a club or having to come up from USL or at ASL. So what grade would I give? I would probably say a C. I don't think it's been bad. I'm one of the few people who thinks that this roster can do better than it has. I don't hate the way they put together the roster, but it certainly could be going better. So I'll give it a solid C.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how that roster was put together, because we look back as fans of the club, and we look back at that expansion draft, and I think at the time we thought, okay, this is pretty solid, but I feel like, and maybe I don't know how you feel about this, you look back on those 5 selections, and really I guess it comes down to 4 since they traded Kai Kamara. That was a really good chance to kind of build something, lay a foundation, and I feel like maybe they missed. What are your thoughts? Do you think they missed now that you had a chance to kind of look at what they did?
Well, excuse me, Fred, but who were the 4 other picks that they had? Was it Garza? It was Eric Alexander, but Ulloa was traded?
So actually, Garza was a trade, so it wasn't part of the expansion draft. So their first pick was Darren Maddox.
It was Maddox,
Eric Alexander,
Kamara, Hassan Nadam.
Yep. And the 4th one is escaping me.
I just did his Open Cup game though. That was something. The Florida Soccer Soldiers over the Charlotte Independents. Best game I've ever seen in my life.
Well, and I'm gonna ask you about that because obviously Ndam was a big pick. Go ahead, Ken. You have the 4th one.
I was just going to say Lamar.
Okay, Roland Lamar.
Okay.
So,
but they didn't even know that they were going to get him. They had to re-sign him.
Correct.
So, yes. All right. Here's my belief is, and you guys actually mentioned Doyle, Ken. I think you brought up Doyle's column. We're saying most teams sit back and counterattack. I actually think that's wrong. I think if you look at Major League Soccer and I were to say, who are the teams that sit and counter, we could do them on one hand, right? We could talk about Portland. We could talk about Montreal are the 2 big ones, Colorado this past weekend. But the number of teams that do it on a regular basis, especially going to the relative point, we could start at the beginning of the season. We could say, these are the 6 actually good soccer teams based on talent, based on just personnel. They are the teams that probably we can clearly say are going to keep the ball. The other 18, what are they doing, right? To me, all 18 of them should probably have a more coherent defensive game plan. So I guess I disagree with Matt on the idea that most teams decided to defend and counter. But that goes back to the roster that Cincinnati built. Taking those players, Kendall Waston, Nick Hagelin, who they definitely overspent on, right? They could have gotten him for cheaper, it sounds like, in that market of allocation money. But even still, so you have Nick Hagelin, you have Kendall Waston, you have Kekuta Mane, you have Darren Maddox, you have Fernando Adi, you have Roland Lamar. To me, there's a very clear through line on how you build that team, and I've said it over and over. So the way they brought these players in, I have no problem with. Did they overspend? Maybe. But if you truly believe in what you're doing, then you have to spend the money as it pertains to you. Did they overspend for the way Atlanta would want those players or LAFC? Maybe. But if you have an idea of how you're going to play and you feel like that is the way that's going to get you to the playoffs, then you spend the money necessarily to get you there. But the weird thing is that they picked up those players and then actually play them in the way that was going to get them there. That's my problem. I have no problem with the way they went about the expansion draft. I just don't know what they did after that.
So, Bobby, this is Ken here. You actually put an article out before we did the draft picks or did the expansion draft, and I think you came out with, and you came out with Rito Ziegler, Mickey Ambrose, and this is the draft. This is the pick that just burns me that we didn't take, and you named them was Florian Valot. Do you think we missed on that? And I know Valot got injured, but I just saw him as a clear-cut can't miss, but just a guy who could play cam or wing, fill in with a Maya, and there's something to build there. And did we waste it on Nadam? And is the expansion draft a place where you pick somebody who's, for lack of a better word, maybe a project? And that's what I'd look at Nadam. I think that's where I feel like we missed. That's what I struggle with.
Well, I would bucket Rito Ziegler into the Ndam category, because to me, if you have center backs in this league, you are ahead of the curve, right? If you have one capable, if you put Chad Marshall on any team, that team is making the playoffs. You put two capable center backs, and you're a top 10 team, a top 8 team. So I think in the quest to get center backs, which is why I would have taken Rito Ziegler. Was he one of the most expensive options in the expansion draft? Yes. Did he probably want to leave after he signed his deal from Europe to? And I always like this. Players come to MLS from Europe, and they're like, what the hell is the expansion draft? You want me to go to Cincinnati when I sign a contract in Dallas? Yeah, that's a problem. You have to deal with the player and the agent. So I understand why teams would be scared off. But going back to the idea of Ndam and Ziegler, to me, if you can get elite center backs and or a player that you think might be an elite center back, especially for the minimum, which is what Ndam was on, I'm fine with you going for it. So do I think you should have gotten Florian Velo? Yes. But at the same time, in my head, I can rationalize the idea of going for an Ndam. And to me, that's what all of this is. This is the important conversation with Cincinnati. Everyone can look after the fact and say, they got this and that wrong. I have no problem going through almost everything they did, with the exception of, literally every pick they did, and say, I get it. I understand the logic. Do I wish that there was a more clear through line through all of it? Yes. But from Fernando Adi to Nick Hagland to Darren Maddox to Issam Ndam, every single player, I understand the logical reasoning to it. And I just think if you're talking about the way this team was built in terms of player personnel, it's a red herring. Yeah, are there things that are some wrong with it? Yes. But ask yourself this. If Bob Bradley, if Peter Vermees had this Cincinnati squad, do they make the playoffs? The answer is yes. So, what the hell are we talking about here and talking about anything other than the way this team performs on the field?
Sure. I mean, that's a valid point. I want to touch on Ndam a little bit, and you had a chance, obviously, to see him up close and personal. Well, maybe not up close and personal, but you know what I mean. You covered the game last week against the Soccer Soldiers when he had that horrendous back pass, and then looked like over the weekend he struggled as well for Charlotte. What exactly did you see in that match in the Open Cup that leads you to believe that he could be a future center back here in Major League Soccer for FC Cincinnati?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to take this bigger picture, if that's okay, because
I
think this is a really interesting conversation in American soccer right now. So we have this idea of the pipeline from academy to USL to MLS. And what that implies is that you do well in the academy, they sign you to the USL deal. You do well to the USL deal, and they sign you an MLS deal. Or maybe like Issam Ndam, they sign you to an MLS deal, and they loan you down. But having been someone who saw a lot, did it myself, but also played with a lot of players, I'm not sure how much an indication playing in USL, or for us, it was the old reserve league or going on loan to a lower division team. Or, I saw literally the same thing in Europe when I was in Scandinavia. I don't know how much of an indication your performance in a lower league in something like the USL is an indication of how you're going to win Major League Soccer. And I know that fans don't love to hear this, but focus matters in a player. And if you go down a level, you don't try as hard. You don't focus as hard. And I know we like to think that if you're a professional athlete, you grind at 100% every single moment, but you just don't. I don't think it's mutually exclusive to say somebody goes down to USL who thinks they should be on an MLS deal, doesn't play well because they don't care, but they can give 100% and be an incredible professional at the MLS level, if that makes sense. So Issam Ndam, not been a great USL player so far. You can go through a whole list of these guys who have not been great USL players, but maybe their MLS career will be better. So that's my general thought on how we think about USL setting up for your MLS career. But I don't know how we do it better, right? I also don't know why a head coach would play a player on his team who hasn't been playing in the USL, but put them on the MLS team. So I don't know how we fix that problem, but having experienced it, I also don't blame players per se for struggling to take that step down when they're just not into it.
Hey, Bobby, Rob Pierce here. As of course, FC Cincinnati had a coaching change a couple weeks ago. And I was just wondering, what plan do you see out on the field And kind of a part two, what plan should they be going forward with, given what you see on the field?
Yeah, so the most basic plan that I've seen so far was what Greg Berhalter did when he took over the national team, which is let's just get the feeling back. Like, let's make people care about us again and like us again. Because even felt amongst your fan base, it was like, God, this sucks. You know, like the players don't look like they want to be there. This isn't fun to watch. It just felt like all of the positive emotion you guys had built up over 3 years had dissipated a little bit. So when I watched that team that first week, I didn't necessarily see a team that was dying to be a possession team or dying to play beautiful soccer. I just saw a team that went out and said, let's just try and make this as fun. Like, let's try and enjoy ourselves, and hopefully the fans enjoy that as well. Because I do think that I would guess that Yohan Damet wants to be a possession coach. I think every coach in 2019 wants his team to play beautiful, attractive soccer. I mean, they certainly all give that statement.
Yeah.
But it also seems to me that Damet is smart enough to adjust to what his team needs to do to win. And that's all me saying is, even though they tried to pass through the first 2 games, I'm not sure that Damet is wedded to that. I think his goal number 1 was make the players enjoy soccer again, make the fans enjoy watching us and believe in us again. So moving forward, I don't see how he sees a path to the playoffs playing possession. And really just for one reason is you can't be a passing team if you don't have center backs who can pass the ball. I think Kendall Waston can be a very good MLS center back. I've said he has traits that can really help a team. He can't pass a soccer ball, right? He can't break lines. He can't connect with his center mids under pressure. His default when he's under pressure is to play it into the channel. And having watched teams my whole life and been on teams that try to be possession teams without center backs who can pass, it's just impossible. So I think taking that basic fact into account, you have to go back to the original point that it was against Atlanta, that it was against, who was it, Portland was at the next win, where it's let's stay tight and get Mane and Maddox out in open field.
Bobby, you mentioned just having fun again. FC Cincinnati kind of in a tough spot there. Something kind of hard to go through as a team. What is more difficult for a player, transitioning from one team to another or having a new coach come in?
Definitely transitioning to a new team. So here's what I would say about the new coach is that unless a coach is really bad, like really, really bad, the team is almost always split. You have to remember that those individuals on the field care about their own career more than they do about the team. You know, it's a sad reality, but they all care about their own playing time, their own next contract, their own bonuses they're trying to hit. So if you were one of Alan Kotz's guys or one of the, present or former coach's guys, even if you know he's not a good coach, you don't want a coaching change because you have your spot in the lineup. If you have your spot in the lineup, you always have a chance, and you don't know what a new coach would do. So I think it's important to remember that regardless of how bad the whole team thinks the coach is, if you are one of the 2 or 3 guys who isn't cemented in that team, and on Cincinnati, I don't know who that is, Greg Garza, like maybe Kendall Waston. To me, literally every other player on that team is in the same box of like fringe rotation players. So there's always some group of players that want the coach to stay because he is playing them. But with that said, it's still always easier when there's a new head coach, just because the reason you get a new head coach is that you were losing, and when you're losing, things are really bad. I mean, walking into a locker room of a losing team is really, really hard. So I would say it's easier, even if you were someone who was playing, that environment of having a new head coach and just having everything reset is a nice feeling.
We're hanging out with Bobby Warshaw. You can check him out on the ExtraTime podcast. Find it in iTunes or wherever podcasts can be found. You can also read his great work over at MLSsoccer.com. So I guess it's a kind of a weird position right now because obviously Yohan Damet is the interim coach or the caretaker manager, however you want to label it, Bobby. But
caretaker, huh? I see what you're doing there.
So going forward, obviously they're going to have to make a coaching hire. I don't think it will be Yohan Damet personally. I could be wrong about that. But now we're talking maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks from now, they get settled into Yohan Damet's style and system, and then all of a sudden it's going to change again. I mean, that can't be easy either.
All right. So if I'm going to give my most blunt answer I can give, which I know is what you're looking for, and I should probably just give it without prefacing that. When I watched this team the first 10 weeks, they had very few fundamentals, right? So when you talk about Yohan Dame's style, I don't think that Yohan is building a style for himself. I think that he's covering the bases that every professional team should have by week 10. And I think that these are simple things. When we press, right, there's 4 phases of the game, right? Attacking, defending, attacking transition, defensive transition. Within those, there's another X number of situations. And you can talk all you want about style or own personal coach preference, but at some point in preseason, in the early phases of the season, you should just work on those general things. How are we going to defend when we're pushed back into 2 lines of 4 and a block of 8? How are we going to defend when we press a little higher? What are our basic patterns when we build out of the back? And I don't think that Cincinnati had many of those through the early weeks. So I'm not sure that Dame at this point is building his own preferences, because we talk about these things, right? When you talk about a coach's style, we're talking about details. We're talking about the way you go about your heart surgery. When we play out of the back, do we have a single player check and the two other center midfielders stay high? Do we have a second player come back and the other player stays high with the center striker? Like, these are minute details that are variations of general premises that most professionals know or work on in preseason. And I think right now Yohan Dame is building the basic premises that hadn't been done. Does that make sense? So I don't think he's building a style that will then get altered by the new coach. I think his charge while he's the manager is to do those basic things that professional teams do that perhaps hadn't actually been done yet.
So, Bobby, we're talking about coaches here, and I wanted to get your take on who you think would make a good manager for us, one within MLS and one without MLS, and realistic, like get not, Pep.
I can't say Jose.
Please, no Jose.
God, Pep at Cincinnati. Pep at Cincinnati would be amazing.
Oh, I'd take that.
Man, okay. So
It could be an assistant too. I'm just somebody within MLS and somebody outside. Yeah.
The outside, I admit that I don't have a great sense of, right? Like, if you want to talk about USL or youth national team coaches, maybe, but like I didn't think Frank de Boer was going to come. I didn't think Matias Almeida was going to come. I sure as hell didn't think Michael Starr was going to come or Anthony Hudson. So I could acknowledge that I've been entirely over on the new coaches that have come in, and I won't pretend like I have a good sense of that, especially with this new potentially Dutch general manager that's coming in. Within MLS, yeah, I'm intrigued by all the same names that everyone else is intrigued by. Like, I want to know what Josh Wolf has picked up from Greg Berhalter over the years. I want to know what Kerry Savagnin has picked up from Peter Vermees over the years. I want to know how Tab Ramos, even though I don't enjoy watching Tab's teams play, and I have a ton of gripe with that, he's gotten decent results for the U20s. Like, he's won he's beaten the teams that have been in front of them. So I would say that those are probably the 3 most interesting names within current American soccer circles. But I will also point out, I don't know if you guys watch U17s, and I generally think under 17 national team soccer is very stupid, and I think there's absolutely no point to watch it.
Right.
I did because it's my job, and I was impressed with what Rafael Wicki did. I mean, that team was not good the first game. It was very clear they got better over the 4 and 5. And if I'm a general manager out there for an MLS team, I would have noticed that and said, he did one of the most impressive things I've ever seen with a team over a 2-week stretch. So he would be on my list as well.
Bobby, can you explain what you think the differences are between a general manager, a technical director, and then a manager?
Oh God.
When
God.
Specifically when it comes to tactical approach and player acquisition.
Yeah.
I know everybody does it,
Okay.
a little differently, but
Right. So in MLS right now, the manager is the head coach, right? They are the one making on-field coaching and stylistic and tactical decisions. Above him is generally either a sporting director or a general manager. And why you pick one or the other just kind of depends to me whether you say soccer or football, right?
Yeah.
There's no rhyme or reason to it, just whatever you prefer. And I would say a lot of teams now that have a sporting director is the overall boss. They make the final decisions in the same way a general manager does in all the other sports. Personnel, long-term vision, they are the head coach and the manager's boss. But a lot of teams like FC Cincinnati also have a technical director. And when I was playing, the technical director assumed the general manager role. They did international signings, they did draft picks, they did trades, they did everything. That's now a little bit too much. So what we found is that the technical director, like a Luke Sassano, like a Marco Ferrucci in Dallas, like I can't think of any other examples off the top of my head. Maybe a Chris Klein that's a bad example. But anyway, the technical director is more domestic. They do the internal, they sign players from USL, they do draft picks, they do trades. And then there's a sporting director who does the international market, is usually the way to look at it. So I would suspect that the new guy that you guys hire, and can you remind me of his name, the new Dutch guy?
I don't even know if I can say it, Bobby.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I would think that he would do the international signings, and Luke would continue to do the more domestic dealings within, because they're just two different beasts, right? They're two giant markets that need to be split up, which is how most teams do it now.
I think his last name is Nieschkamp, and I probably am butchering that. Rob, do you know how to say his last name?
That's the way I would pronounce it, is Niche Camp.
Okay. So maybe we'll be hearing his name a lot more, Bobby.
Probably. It sounds like you will.
Well, I guess the biggest question we have, and look, and maybe the expectations before the season were harsh and unfair, but to be fair, I mean, this is really what Jeff Birding and the front office staff of FC Cincinnati has kind of set the expectations, right? They do it every year. And they felt like, playoffs were something that could be achieved this year. Now, obviously, they got off to a rough start, and we knew that 10-game stretch to begin the year was going to be brutal, right? Is this still something that could be achievable for FC Cincinnati? I mean, they expanded it to 7 spots this year, or is that really a pipe dream at the moment? And really, this is more about building on the future of what this club will be, 10, 20 years from now.
So I would have come into this entire year with playoffs would be a bonus. And I would have done that mostly with the idea of just getting Frankie Amaya minutes and getting him on the under-20 national team. Like, I think it cannot be overstated what a horrible, gigantic mess up that was by FC Cincinnati. Like, you had this. So in a larger picture, I think what we're looking at is that Atlanta, LAFC, Seattle, maybe Portland now that they're buying $10 million players, NYCFC, even though they said they were going to back off. But there's an inherent advantage to these teams that are going to spend $8 and $10 million on 1 or 2 players on their team. Philadelphia, FC Cincinnati, FC Dallas, they don't have that upfront money to invest. But you can get into that cycle. And one of the ways you get into that cycle is you develop and you sell. So you might not have $8 million right now to invest, but if you develop Austin Trusty for, I don't know, if you amortize like whatever he was in the academy to $700,000 over 6 years of development, you sell him for $3 million. Now you've got an extra $2 million. You do that for 2 players. Now all of a sudden you're both bringing players to your academy, and you can buy a $6 million player. To me, that's what FC Cincinnati needs to do. They can't buy Tito Villalba and Miguel Almiron right away. How do you get into that market? You had Frankie Amaya. You had this guy that was in the potential, not just to be like on the team, but started games and qualifiers at the U20 World Cup, which is this incredible showcase to sell players. And he has the potential to go to a Liga MX team on a domestic deal. And you didn't do everything you could to maximize his transfer value, so that maybe you sell him for $2, $3, $4 million, and then you start to get that ball rolling on future investments. To me, was just insane. Right? So that is the number one thing. Can you still make the playoffs this year? Yeah, of course. It happens all the time. Montreal went on a 6-game win streak and missed the playoffs by a point last year. I'm a big believer that soccer is a coach's game. If you have the right coach who can put the right players in the right place, then you can absolutely win, especially in Major League Soccer, where there's still a lot of teams who go out with this idea of playing like a certain style of soccer and not really prioritizing winning. So yes, you can still make the playoffs this year. Should that have been the plan coming into the year based on the long-term view, probably not. Is
Yeah.
that an okay answer? Is that I know there was a lot going on there. I apologize.
No, I mean, I think the way to approach it, the way you mentioned, was right. I mean, go into this with cautious optimism, right? If they make the playoffs, that's like the cherry on the cake or whatever. I mean, because historically, expansion franchises don't do well in year one of Major League Soccer, and to expect us to perform, when I say us, FC Cincinnati, to perform like LA did last year, or who was another recent expansion team that made it in the playoffs? Atlanta. They made it in their first year. But again, look who their coaches are, right? I mean, you got Bob Bradley, who's arguably one of the greatest coaches in American soccer history, and you got what's his name down in now he's coaching Mexico. So it is what it is. I want to talk a little bit more about coaching because I'm glad you brought that up. And I hear this term about that fourth DP being the coach, right? I mean, that's how important that really is. Obviously, the first 10 matches or so, it just did not go great for FC Cincinnati. They made the change. It was, in hindsight, right move. I mean, look, it is what it is, but they had to make a change. They had to right the ship and get this thing back to, like you said, enjoyable to watch again. So I hope that they hit a home run with this coach.
I totally agree with you, especially since you guys deserve it. Like, the fans in Cincinnati deserve it. You guys have been engaged. You basically drove this club through your involvement into Major League Soccer. So I definitely, I hope you guys figure it out. And I do think that if you have the right coach in this league, as we're learning from Jim Curtin and Remy Garda, resources aren't really a factor. You can still make a very good team.
Well, we hope you're right. We hope that happens soon too. But we appreciate you being with us again, Bobby. It's always a blast having a chance to catch up with you. When are you writing your next book? Because the last one was a big hit.
Oh, man. I can't even start to think about that right now.
Folks,
I appreciate that. It's a nice thing for you guys to say.
Tell folks about the book and where they can find it.
I would say the book is just what I would like to think is an honest recount of what it's like to be a professional athlete, the average professional athlete. But I hope when you read it, there's also a lot of parts that connect with you, even if you're not an athlete. No matter what your job is, I think a lot of the things that I felt as a professional soccer player, other people feel in whatever their livelihood is. And I think that it feels good to hear other people go through similar things. And that's what I try to accomplish with it.
Well, it was really good. It's called When the Dream Became Reality, The Journey of a Professional Soccer Player and the Push for Meaning, Purpose, and Contentment. You can find it wherever you can find books. Amazon, really easy to find that. We'll include a link as well in our show notes so you can go find that. Bobby, as always, thank you so much. Tell all the guys at Extra Time we said hello as well.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much, guys. You do such a good job. It's always fun to come on here.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. That's Bobby Warshaw joining us here on the Kings Hammer Hotline here this evening. Always a blast to chat with him. I tell you what, he does a great job over at Extra Time and all the stuff he writes over at MLSsoccer.com. Seriously, if you're not following Bobby and what he does, you're really missing out. So we thank him for being with us this week on the Kings Hammer Hotline. All right, it's that time of the show where we give a big shout out and thanks to our tremendous supporters. First up, Kings Hammer and Tim Bronsill, Matt Adamczyk, Mama Subs, Brian Malone, Jamie Smed, Jonas Tom, Jack Emery, Mike Bowman, Kathleen Francis, Teresa Everidge, Matt Imholt, Matthew Long, Joe Coling, and Tara Mullins. Thank you so much for supporting us here at Cincinnati Soccer Talk. To learn more on how you can support the show, head on over to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/support. All right, so we kind of talked about it a little bit in that interview with Bobby about the new general manager rumored. This has not been confirmed by the club, but this is per a report from Jeff Reuter of The Athletic. Apparently it is Niekamp. That's how you say his last name. Gerard Niekamp has been hired by FC Cincinnati. He will join FCC from PSV Zwolle. I'm sure I butchered that. In the top flight of the Eredivisie. Rob, you had a chance. You wrote about him a little bit over the weekend on the website. Who are FC Cincinnati potentially getting as their, I guess, really, I can't say first GM, but their next GM. Can you hear me, Rob? Can't hear me. Okay. All right. So while we wait for Rob and Ken, because clearly they can't hear me or see me, let's talk a little bit about the general manager position. Jeff Birding. We had a little bit of I don't want to call it a scare, but last week FC Cincinnati or on the radio WLW, Pat Brennan went on the air and said that that Jeff Birding was out, and that was not the case, right? Jeff Birding did not leave the club. He's still the president. He's still going to be working very closely with Dennis Carroll on the business side of things. But per a league source, FC Cincinnati is obviously in the process of hiring a general manager to handle the football side of things. So our Gerard Niekamp apparently has been hired by FCC. He will join from the top flight and the Eredivisie. So, yeah, as we work through the technical difficulties here on the show, Ken and Rob can't hear me. They can't see me. We're going to try and get them back as quickly as we possibly can. While we wait for that, we're going to talk a little bit about the foot golf event coming up here on August 24th. You won't want to miss it. This is coming up on August 24th at Woodland Golf Course. Sign up now over at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/footgolf. $180 gets you into the event. That is for the foursome. And this event is family friendly as well. So head on out to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/footgolf. Again, $180 gets your foursome into the group. And then, of course, a little bit later on in the summer, we'll be raising that price up to $200. So get your teams in as soon as you possibly can. Let's do a little Growler Cup update as well. Presented by Omni Printing and Promotion. Surprisingly, no one got the score right this week. Nobody had 5-1 in this match against Orlando. So people riding high in the coaching change thought that there was going to be a big score bump. Did not happen. Only 7 people predicted losses. 3 people predicted a 2-1 defeat. Michael Muchler, Jamie Lay, and our own Ken Hetker. They were the top earners this week with 5 points. Brian Weigel, believe it or not, still sits at the top of the pack this week, having earned 4 points for this game. Sarah Spriggs and Gary Randolph are only one point back, tied for second. So to learn more on how you can join the Growler Cup, it's not too late. Even if you are late to the game, we will reset the scores coming up after week 18. So still a chance and still plenty of time to get involved. CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/Growler Cup. All right. Trying to figure out what exactly is going on with Ken and Rob. All right, so we're going to take a pause. I'm going to put up this screen here. We're going to take a pause, and I will be back, and I'm going to try and get these back on the show so we can wrap things up here on Cincinnati Soccer Talk. Don't go anywhere. Hey, we're back here on Cincinnati Soccer Talk. We hope. We were talking a little bit about the general manager situation for FC Cincinnati. I think I have Ken and Rob back. We will find out here shortly when I throw it to them. As I already did during the show, I threw it over to Rob, and he was not responding. So glad we had these technical difficulties after we chatted with Bobby, Rob. But it looks like FC Cincinnati has hired their guy, according to Jeff Ruder from The Athletic. It's going to be Gerard Niekamp, as I've been told in the chat room.
Yeah, I saw that also, that apparently the correct pronunciation is Niekamp, so I will definitely make note of that. Yeah, this is a story that Jeff Reuter broke on Saturday, something that will allow Jeff Birding to step back as the general manager and focus on his job at as club president. Don't know a whole lot about Niekamp, but I do know that he had a bit of success from where he came from over at PEC Zwolle over in the Eredivisie. One of the first things he did was bring in a new coach, Ron Jans. This is all according to Reuters report. And he led the club to the 2014 Dutch version of the U.S. Open Cup. And Zwolle got into the Europa League that way. So it sounds like he had a bit of success over there. And I would expect the first thing that he would do would be to hire a coach. Well, one of the first things anyway. And then after that, perhaps the academy and steps below the head coach and kind of just fill some roles and meet some needs.
Yeah, I think the head coach, obviously, big priority for FC Cincinnati over the next few weeks, of course, developing an academy as well. I don't know much about the Dutch Eredivisie other than, the main players there in Ajax and PSV, Ken. But from what you've read on this guy, it sounds like there is some potential there.
Yeah, I mean, I've only perused. It's hard to get a little good information on him right now, but I have seen that people comment that he's done well with the PEC's Zwolle's academy. So that's a positive of having him here. And the other thing that Bobby brought up, which is something I didn't even, maybe it's the way we're going to be set up, is he'll focus on Europe and whoever or Sassano will be North America bound. But there is a rumor that Matt Doyle broke of Philippe Cocu, who's a Dutch coach manager, potentially being the next FCC coach, and there's a nice tie. I mean, it's Dutch, so I don't know how true it is, but Matt Doyle from ExtraTime broke that, I guess, at the end of the show today. So that's all I have. I really don't know enough about him to speak intelligently.
That is a good point that Bobby mentioned when we were talking to him about the technical director kind of focusing on the domestic side, and then somebody like Niekamp can, with his international ties, kind of work on Europe and other international areas such as that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And we saw over the weekend, we actually saw Luke Sassano on the sideline in a coaching capacity, actually helping out with one less coach. I saw him on the sideline, and I did not know that he was going to be assistant coaching. But it makes sense, obviously, with one less coach. Get an extra set of hands there to try and help out. So, of course, this is all a report, and this is not officially confirmed by the club. So the Niekamp signing reported by Jeff Ruder of The Athletic. And, of course, as soon as we have any kind of breaking news, we will be sure to be reporting it over at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. While you two gentlemen were away, I did give a Growler Cup update. And, of course, don't forget our foot golf event coming up here on August 24th. It's not too late to get registered. Head on over to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/footgolf to do just that. We're going to have CST Extra Time coming up here in just a moment. But before we wrap up, your final thoughts, Ken Hetker. Ken, it was a pleasure having you back this week, man.
Yeah, it was nice being on. I'm going to stay short and sweet. It's time to stay positive.
Who is this Ken Hetker?
I know. I I want to emphasize or bring up Montreal lost 7-1 to Sporting KC, and they've turned their season around. I'm not saying we're going to be playoff bound, but there are positive things, and just look forward to those aspects, and we're going to grow this team. It's just going to take a couple tries.
Yeah. Patience, right? We can't use the other phrase that we used to use all the time because that's we can erase that one, right? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't know what you're talking
Okay,
about.
good. But no, it was good. By the way, good seeing you last week, and good seeing you again this week. And thanks for being on the show, Ken.
Thanks for having me.
Final thoughts from Rob Pierce. Rob?
I'm going to go a little bit off the pitch with my final thoughts. When we had Spencer Ritchie on last week, we were talking to him about playing for Pride to benefit the LGBTQ community. And now the Pride supporters group and Die Innenstadt, they both have fundraisers kind of along the same lines. The Pride has 3 fundraisers. They have a march, a scarf like the one you might see over my shoulder from last year, donations for every goal FC Cincinnati scores in June. And Die Innenstadt kind of joined in, and they're also driving for donations for every goal in June. My wife and I already bought Pride scarves again for the cause this year. It's a good cause, so if you're able to consider supporting it.
Good stuff, Rob. As always, appreciate it. What's in store for the site this week? Anything new?
On the website this week, it's kind of the usual. We've kind of gotten into a little bit of a pattern, which I kind of find it familiar anyway. At least our readers know what they'll be getting.
Yeah.
So look for news and notes, MLS news and notes, power rankings, and then here in a couple of days we'll have the preview for the Red Bulls coming out.
And we had Talking Tactics today, I believe, with Brad Goff. He put that out as well. I mean, that's been I think we've been getting a lot of good feedback about that. Just seeing how it's all broken down has been kind of cool.
Yeah, I've gotten an education just kind of looking everything over, and I hope our readers have too.
So check that out over at CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com. My final thoughts again. Thank you for tuning in live tonight on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Thank you to Bobby Warshaw from MLSsoccer.com for joining us this week. A lot of great insight. A lot of fun to have him on, and we'll hopefully have him on again here real soon. We've got CST Extra Time coming up next for Ken Hetker and Rob Pierce. I'm Subes, reminding you to watch your tackles, and we'll see you all next week. Hey, we're back. CST Extra Time coming at you. Didn't get a lot of tweets this week. Our staff intern, Jacob Clary, he gone and graduated. So we don't have anybody to get those tweets out.
He done did it.
He done did it. We did get one tweet. This is from, let me pull this up. This is from Olivia. She says, which was more disappointing, the FCC game or the final episode of Game of Thrones? I'll be honest, I'm not a Thrones guy. I've never watched it, so I don't know what she's talking about.
Olivia just went 0 for 3 on this call because I don't think any of us watched Game of Thrones.
Nope.
I did watch one season finale last night, but it was not Game of Thrones. I watched Barry. I started watching that Saturday night, and I would right around 11 o'clock. And I made it through the first season. It was only 8 episodes, and then the second season was only 8 episodes. And yeah, I knocked that one out pretty quickly. Barry, that's a good show if you haven't watched it.
So what is Barry? I've not heard of this.
So it's a show on HBO. Barry is he's an ex-military vet who came back to post-military life and is employed as a hitman, a guy who is basically killing people and being paid for it, right? He stumbles upon an acting class in L.A. while doing a job and found his new passion of acting. And so it's the balance of learning a new passion, trying to get out of his old life and still dealing with all the negative side of things of being a hitman. And it's pretty funny. Bill Hader is the star. He's a pretty funny guy, and it's pretty graphic, but pretty funny.
It'd be funny if he was acting as a hitman.
Well, he kind of is, right?
I don't know. Is he?
Well, I mean, on the show he's acting as a hitman, but you're saying like as a I
As
see
the
what you're
actor,
saying.
yeah.
Right. No, he he's pretty funny.
This is
That's
like
funny.
CST book club right now.
Yeah, yeah. We recommended Bobby's book tonight. I could. It's been a while. I need to read more books, but I don't have time.
Yeah.
You guys readers?
No.
Yes,
Really?
I just started Harry Potter book 4, Goblet of Fire.
Dang. Why read that book when you can watch the movie?
I do both. I read the book and then I watch the movie.
I can't say. I don't think I've seen any of the Harry Potters either. So
I struggle to keep attention for anything longer than 50 pages.
Yeah.
So I read a lot of articles, and I read constantly during the day. So that's me.
I'm not a book reader, but I'm an article reader. Like I'll read web articles and soccer articles and stuff like that. But not really for me.
Yeah, I do both. I try to absorb as much soccer as I can, but at some point I have to get away and need a distraction, and that's where Harry Potter comes in.
We did get this. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
I was going to say, hey, listeners, recommend your most popular or favorite book, and Rob will read it to you. read it, and give you a rundown next week.
We did get this in the chat. Wes and Rob Burkhart both saying audiobooks are where it's at. Wes says Audible is great. Now, I had an Audible subscription, and I bought a couple audiobooks. And when I was working third shift and, basically was listening to podcasts or audio for 8 straight hours, you're right, it was great. But now that I, my day job requires me to be on the phone, my podcast consumption took a massive hit. So I'm limited now to just really 40 minutes a day, and that's just in my 2 commutes, there and back. So yeah.
That's about where I am. I know my wife, she just started with some sort of audio book, and she really enjoys it. But I'm on the phone a little bit at work too, so commute time is for podcasts, and I do get a little bit of podcast time at work, but not as much as I used to.
Yeah. You're a big podcast guy, right, Ken? We must have lost Ken.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what it's doing. Yeah, I'm a big. I listen to like Reply All and a bunch of soccer podcasts. So, I'm a podcast guy. Yeah, okay. I listen to about 3 a day.
Dang, must be nice.
Well, MLS Extra Time is like twice a week, and then I do listen to our show even if I listen to it on the live just to try and sound better. Get rid of my country accent.
Oh, this is great. Rob in the chat says, the team had a bad week when we're talking about books. That's great.
Best 3-line response.
That's right.
We're talking books.
All right. Well, Olivia, thank you for the Twitter question tonight. We appreciate it. If you're watching live or anytime you want to send us extra time questions, use the hashtag CST extra time, and we'll answer them here on the show. That's going to be it for us tonight. Thanks for sticking with us through all the technical difficulties tonight, and we'll see y'all next week.